So you got a quarterback who's got you in the top three passing yards. He helps get your offense in the top five total yards in the NFL, and he's not the future of your team? Brendan Albert here with Adrian Fedq. Going to talk about the Washington Redskins. And obviously, Adrian, when we talk about Washington, we got to start off and talk about the quarterback situation.
Got to start with Cousins. I wasn't a fan last year. He's starting to kind of creep up on me a little bit. He's starting to get there with me, but I don't know what to think. Kirk Cousins, is he the guy? They've been kind of screwing him over. He should have. So if I was him, I wouldn't want any parts of Washington.
You know, I think it's funny because, like, even when Kirk Cousins was drafted, he was never really given the full, like, oh, yeah, you're definitely our quarterback. Now, I understand, obviously, when they drafted him, they drafted RG3, and they drafted him high, so I understand why they, like, hey, this is going to be our future of the league. Well, RG3 has been gone for a while now, and Kirk Cousins has been nothing but overachieved, and yet Washington has not really fully shown they support him. Now, obviously, they did make him that contract offer, but even when you look into it, the contract offer didn't fully blow you away. Now, I look at like what they did with Stafford. Yes, Stafford became the highest paid player in the NFL a couple days ago. I don't think Cousins worth the same money that Stafford is, but at the same time, like, newsflash for you, Washington, you've never had a quarterback be able to produce the way Kirk Cousins is for you. So for me, I think if you're Washington, you have to put money on the table and say, hey, let's ride with it, because he's been nothing but productive for you.
Yeah, that's the question here. It's like, because we had that conversation yesterday. Matthew paid, and that's kind of how I view this situation a little bit. So it's almost like, all right, you pretty much have to extend them, because if you don't, who else are you going to get?
You're spot on right there, Adrian. And here's the reason why you have to extend them, because the natural reaction is, oh, well, we'll just go draft one of those great quarterbacks. You're not going to be bad enough to be in one of those spots to draft one of those quarterbacks unless someone like Josh Rosen from UCLA slides, maybe because some of the off-the-field personality concerns. But even then you're only looking at one real option, and there's a lot of teams like the Jets, the Bills, the Jags, all who are going to be way worse than you, are going to draft several picks ahead of you, and almost all of them have more trade options as far as multiple picks now. So Washington, you're going to be in a spot where you're probably not going to get that first-round quarterback. So unless you're real confident that you can find a late-round guy to replace Cousins, I'm not really sure where that quarterback's going to be to replace him next year.
Now the question is, all right, we know what he did. 4,917 yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Now we're seeing an overhaul a little bit. Sean McVay, he goes to the Rams, becomes their head coach. So now you're going to have a switch. Matt Cavanaugh becomes the offensive coordinator. He was the quarterbacks coach. You're going to see changes at your wide receiving core. Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon no longer there. They signed Terrell Pryor. So the question for you is, all right, are we going to see regression from Kirk Cousins because of all this?
I don't think we'll see regression with him because the offensive coordinator switch. And I say that because he's gone through the offensive coordinator switch and he hasn't really shown anything. And the bigger reason I say this isn't because they're changing offensive coordinators. They're changing offensive coordinators, yes, but it's still keeping all in-house. So I don't see any of the new staff with the Redskins when they're changing the offense really doing anything different. So I don't see a big change off there. Now, when we go into the receivers, I do see a little bit of a change off. Yeah, you know what? Deshaun Jackson is nowhere near as explosive as he was during his days in Philadelphia. But I do think Terrell Pryor and Pierre Garçon, I like Pierre Garçon a lot more than Terrell Pryor. And I say that because, you know, as big and as impressive as Pryor's year was, it's only really been 1 year of sample size. I knew every single week Pierre Garçon is going to be the exact same PPR target monster. I don't know about Terrell Pryor. I'm not ready to say, hey, I'm 100% confident on him. I see the upside, certainly, but you know what? You know who else doesn't believe in his confidence? The Washington Redskins. That's why they signed him such a short-term deal, because they even said, hey, we want to kind of give you a prove-me deal, similar to what the Eagles did with Torrey Smith. They kind of said, hey, we know that, you know, we're going to give you an opportunity for us to re-sign you in the long term, but realistically, both of those guys are on one-year deals this year.
Yeah, and a guy like him came on so strong to start the year, but he kind of fell off near the end. So that makes you question, all right, is he going to be able to bounce back and play up to the potential and capability that he was his first half of the season? So that's the question there. All right, position by position we will go. Running back situation is not looking so hot.
It's not looking awesome, but at the same time, it's just a whole bunch of guys who I think really all bring very similar skill sets to the table here. You look up several years ago, Matt Jones was supposed to be the guy, and now Rob Kelly inserted himself, played, it's pretty well last year, and now people are like, oh, maybe it's Samaje Perine. All three of those guys, realistically, are the exact same skill set. That said, the Redskins ultimately are going to go four deep at running back. And I don't think any of these guys are really the bell cow. They're just going to kind of rotate them. And on surface, I can understand that's good. But personally, for me, I truly believe that as a running back or really any player in the NFL, you got to get into a system. You got to get into a good rhythm of things. And if you keep rotating guys in and out, it's hard for a guy really to get hot and really get, in a good streak. So I don't love what Washington's doing, but at the same time, I'd rather have that situation than some other teams in the NFL.
Here's what I'll say about it. All right, they don't have a feature back, but their offensive line is so good that you can kind of put anyone back there and you're going to get positive yardage. I mean, this is, in my opinion, a top five offensive line in the NFL. I mean, they're studs. So that's kind of the situation there. I mean, like Rob Kelly, he's their number one, but I don't even have him in like my top 25 out of running. So, that's they've been doing this for years now. This is what they do.
Without a question. I mean, getting a good offensive line certainly allows everyone else's value to kind of get a little bump up there. But I agree with you, Adrian. I don't think there's any running backs here who are solidified, solid starters in the NFL. They have four guys who realistically are going to be rotational backups for the rest of their careers, in my opinion. Maybe P. Ryan, shows something, but realistically, I think he's just going to be another rotational back.
All right, receivers. So we brought up Terrell Pryor. The other one that's going to have to step up for them is Josh Dotson, last year's first round pick, dealt with injuries last year. So is he going to be able to produce in DC?
I have no freaking clue. And I say that because I've never seen anything from him in the NFL. Now, when I saw him in TCU, my concerns for him were very similar to Kevin White. Not necessarily that, I mean, Josh Doxson obviously had a larger body of work, but my concern for him was the fact that realistically, he's coming from a systematic offense where he's not asked to run a full route tree or anything. So maybe actually the year off for him actually benefited him. Become a little more NFL, increases NFL IQ, become more aware of how defenses are going to work because you're not running the same route every single time like you did in college. So I'm a little curious about him. Now, the other things we know about the receiving core, they have a really nice slot receiver there in Crowder. He's a guy who gets a lot of targets. He was a former running back in his time, and now he's a slot receiver. Great hands, good PPR guy. And then quietly, I really like the signing of Brian Quick there from the Rams. So Brian Quick is going to be one of the best number four receivers in the NFL. Realistically, it's a much better situation than what the running backs are, but it's a similar approach. Washington's trying to go by a war by attrition, not necessarily a war by elite starters. But I tell you what, in today's NFL, where we're seeing more and more 11 personnel, three receiver sets, I'll take what Washington has over a lot of teams. But I'm not really set that Pryor is going to be able to put the same numbers up. To me, Adrian, fantasy value here, I'm going to say, you know what? I'll wait and I'll take Josh Doxson over guys like Crowder and over guys like Pryor. Not because I think he's better, but I don't think that the numbers he's going to produce is going to be that much different than the other two guys. And Josh Doxson's a guy going like 5 rounds lower than Crowder and probably even like 8 rounds lower than Pryor. So, for me, hey, give me Josh Doxson. I'll take the flyer at the end of my draft.
Yeah, I get the sense that they're going to be okay at the wide receiver spot, even though they lost Jackson and Jesus and Garcon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, but it's going to be like a cumulative effect. I really like Jamison Crowder. I think he brings a lot to the table. We'll see about Dotson and Pryor. I don't think Pryor is a fluke, but I also don't think he's a stud either. So I think he's really good. So he's that kind of sense. and the Prove It deal, as you explained. And then they also have Jordan Reed as well, as long as he can stay on the field.
Yeah, when we go to the tight end situation, Jordan Reed is probably the best move tight end in the NFL. The guy who moves a lot like the H-back situation, lines up, in the dot, or lines up, in the off tackle position behind him. So as far as the tight end situation, great tight end, but as you said, Adrian, hasn't proven to stay healthy. Now that's not the worst thing in the world because of the depth they have at tight end. Vernon Davis had a remarkably good year for what we've seen in the past couple from him. So there's a good sign there. And then Niles Paul, I think he might be the only guy in NFL history to be a tight end and then also have lined up to return kicks, which really tells you how freaking dynamic he is since he came out of Nebraska. So again, 3 deep there at tight end. So really what I'm looking here at the receivers and the tight ends, both these positions have one guy that realistically are Pro Bowl level caliber guys. Receivers have 2 guys who I really like a lot in Crowder and Josh Doctson potentially. And then Washington's tight end group is pretty deep too. So receiving core, combining those 2 positions, is pretty darn good for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. And offensive line gives him a lot of protection. So he's able to go through his progressions. And I think that's a really underrated factor here that not too many people talk about all the time. They talk about the weapons, they talk about his quick release, but he's given a lot of protection because of the O-line, and it's led by Trent Williams, 5-time Pro Bowler. But it's not only just him. The cumulative effort. They have a great starting fivesome there. Even Morgan Moses is very underrated as the right tackle. They have Sean Laval as their left guard. Their right guard is the kid that they picked up in the draft a couple years ago, Brandon Sheriff. They originally picked him to play tackle. He's playing guard for them. And then their center is Spencer Long. So really, really good fivesome.
Yeah, 3 of those guys are really, really high caliber guys there. Obviously, Trent Williams, he leads the way, as you said, a 5-time Pro Bowler, probably a top 3 left tackle in the NFL, super athletic, and you know what? He's a nasty SOB. He wants to finish blocks. I love that. Then you go over to right tackle. Morgan Moses is probably one of the most underrated right tackles in the NFL, but you know what? We got to give credit where credit's due. As good as he is, his life's a lot easier when you get to play next to the Sheriff, one of the better right guards in the NFL. He was a guy when the Redskins drafted him, a lot of people said, we don't really need another left tackle. Well, they found a way to use him, and he's been nothing but an awesome player there for right guard. Very good offensive line. I'm with you, Adrian. Definitely a top 5 offensive line in the NFL that makes everything on that offense a lot better because, hey, look, we're not playing 7-on-7 football, fellas. We're playing in the NFL, and they've got a very good offensive line.
Yep, and you're spot on. Trent Williams, number 3 tackle in the NFL. So there you go. And a nasty son of a bitch is a perfect way to describe it. So, all right, moving on to the defensive line. They lose Chris Baker, which is like a low-key kind of underrated loss for them. What are your thoughts on the rest of that D-line?
Honestly, it's not a great unit here. The strength really in the front 7 in Washington, in my opinion, is in their linebacking core. But when we're looking here at the D-line, really Ryan Kerrigan's the only real guy that really scares me. Now, obviously, Jonathan Allen fell into their lap when they were there. I think it was one of those things when, you're in the draft room and you look around and you're like, wait, no one's taken him yet? Hey, do a real check, double check. Injury, is he okay? And as long as, the doctors gave him, hey, he's good, go ahead, grab him. So it's a steal there. So for Washington, best player available was a great move there in the first round, getting Jonathan Allen, getting some more depth at the D-line position. Now, when you look now on the edge, Ryan Kerrigan, he's a former Pro Bowler himself. He's one of the 5 former Pro Bowlers for the Washington Redskins last year. But after that, there's a bit of a drop. Trent Murphy was supposed to be a guy who have a good year. He's out for the year, and it was a contract year for him. So I'm real curious to see how that's going to affect his contract negotiations. Junior Gillette is another guy that they had high hopes for. He's missed the last 2 seasons, so there's kind of a miss there. Preston Smith was a guy that, they kind of took as a flyer, and then he had to play a lot last year. He had 5 sacks last year, which is great, but he's expected to really perform really well. And then Washington doubled down in the second round, went with another Tide player, and they went and got Ryan Anderson, an outside linebacker. So Washington has a lot of options there on the outside linebacker position. One guy's gone for the year. Another guy's missed the last 2 years. And then Preston Smith, he's young, so we're not anything confident in him. And then you got a rookie in Ryan Anderson. So opposite of Brian Kerrigan, not a lot of threats there for Washington as far as getting after the quarterback.
Dude, you brought up that name, Junior Gillette, and I have completely forgotten about him. Oh, there's a name drop. I got a question for you. They were 32nd in the league last year on third down, giving up 46.6% conversion rate. What do you think the reasoning is for that?
Well, the surface thing people are going to hear when they hear that statistic, they're going to say, "Oh, well, then it's probably coverage, and it's probably not getting after the quarterback." For me, I'm willing to bet you they're losing first and second down pretty heavily against the run because that makes their down a lot easier. So obviously, there, when you lose Baker inside in that 3-4 defense, that's a big loss. So they have a couple guys like McGee and former Taylor, who was a draft pick out of I believe Baylor. They got a couple guys there. It's not a great front three of the front four. Now, when we get to the middle, this is what I do like there for Washington. Mason Foster and Zach Brown, two good inside backers. And then you add in Will Compton, who's a really nice third option. Realistically, we're talking about the Packers. I would take Will Compton as a starter over any of the inside linebackers in the 3-4 the Packers run. But to me, Adrian, to go back to your initial question, I chalk up more of the concern with third down conversion rate by losing on first and second down.
Yeah, and besides Josh Norman, not much at cornerback last year either. Rashad Breeland did not have a good season for them. We'll see about this Fabian Moreau, the kid that they drafted the corner from UCLA. Quentin Dunbar, I think, is solid for them. He's their nickel guy, I believe. So, but going back to the front seven, I mean, I really like Ryan Kerrigan, but when you look at the rest of it, there really isn't much there. And I'll say this, everyone talks about Pierre Garcon and just Deshaun Jackson losing those guys, but I think losing Chris Baker hurts a lot more than those two.
I would probably agree with you. In the large scale things, I would say the Washington did a pretty darn good job replacing the receivers, and realistically, that's like that's the sexy thing to talk about in the offseason. It's not fun talking about interior linemen. So losing Chris Baker, I agree with you, Adrian. I don't think that the Redskins did a great job replacing him. I obviously do like the Jonathan Allen draft pick, but I would have liked to see another signing.
Yeah, they got rid of Baker. They drafted Jonathan Allen, and they signed a couple low-key free agents in Terrell McClain and Stacey McGee. That's how they made up for the loss of it. But you're not just going to make up the loss of Chris Baker right away. So we'll see how that goes. All right, moving on to the secondary now. Josh Norman, what are your thoughts on him? Is he overrated? Is he all talk? What is he?
No, he's not overrated, honestly. Quietly, last year was his best year, in my opinion, of his NFL career. I mean, this was the first year where he was really asked to kind of show a wider base of coverage options and cover plays, and he looked pretty damn good.
No. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't just zone all the time with him. And he was matched up one-on-one against Odell Beckham. Did a great job with him, I thought. Obviously, we know the battles that they go through. I have Josh Norman as a top 5 cornerback in the league still, so I still think he's very talented.
I agree with you. I think that was a really bad move by Carolina moving on from him. But you know what? Josh Norman, in my opinion, I really believe that last year was his best year of his NFL career, and he's a multiple Pro Bowl guy. So you add him in there, you're in a really good spot. Now, when we look at Breeland, if I remember correctly, Breeland was a guy who was a former receiver in college that moved over to corner to try to keep his job in the NFL. And that's all well and good, but those guys usually aren't necessarily going to be studs in the NFL, guys who have to make type of transitions like that. So obviously, as you said, Adrian, opposite corner, not awesome as a situation, especially when you're going to go against teams this year like the Giants with 2 Pro Bowl level receivers right there. Obviously, the Eagles have 2 guys who are new acquisitions. Both of them have shown a ton of upside. And then, of course, you have Dallas with, you figure, okay, well, fine. Dez gets Norman. Well, then, okay, now you have Cole Beasley and Newman. Those aren't exactly the worst number 2 and number 3 options in the NFL. So it is a big ask for that second corner spot there in Washington.
Yeah, I just remember last preseason, all the clips of Norman getting burned by Deshaun. They were talking about how he was having this horrible training camp. And then the regular season happened, and he was pretty damn good, and everyone shut the fuck up.
You know what? Honestly, if you're every day having to go against Pierre Garcon and every day having to go against Jamison Crowder and every day having to go against Deshaun Jackson, you're gonna get better. So yeah, I understand that because the people are like, oh, he's getting burned. Well, why don't we talk about the fact that the receiver's doing what he's doing, supposed to be doing too? Like sometimes everyone wants to like be the guy laughing down, saying, "Ha ha, look how bad you are." It's like, how about we respect the fact that Deshaun Jackson's really freaking fast, and on 7-on-7, where you're not necessarily getting a full look, or you're not really getting a full pressure, or you're not having the safety really over the top, it's pretty damn hard to play, corner in the NFL. I still think corner is the hardest position to play if any level of any level of football, right there of quarterback, of course. But you know what? I love what Josh Norman's doing. I'm a big fan of his.
DJ Swearinger, Sua Cravens, those are your safeties. We'll see. I mean, Cravens is interesting. The USC kid. We'll see. Swearinger is just like kind of a guy, but he was pretty good for them last year.
DJ Swearinger, he's a guy, he's a big hitter, but you know what? He's never played a full season in the NFL. I mean, that's just something you have to say. He's been in the league for several years. Last year, he was with Arizona. Previously to that, he was with Houston. Previously to that, I think he was also with the Broncos. No, with the Houston. I mean, he's one of those guys where he flies around the field. He's a big hitter. So for all Washington Redskins fans, I'm going to tell you this right now. For every time you see a big hit, expect in the next 2 games at least, he's going to get fouled for a targeting penalty or helmet to helmet or something like that, because he's definitely a guy who leads with his helmet. And realistically, you need to have a safety behind him. So Will Blockman is a guy that they brought in as a guy to kind of, be another option there at the free safety spot. Realistically, both of those guys are going to rotate because at some point in time, Swearinger either going to hurt himself or he's going to get a personal foul and they're going to pull him. It's a very, very problematic situation having a free safety, but he's been an NFL starter. He's probably a more top 25 guy, but he makes a lot of splash big hits, so people think he's better than he really is.
Yeah. Who's on the hot seat in Washington?
Ah, God.
Kirk
No, I don't think Kirk Cousins is. But who I think is management. For anyone who thinks that Kirk Cousins isn't necessarily a solidified starter, okay, then show me what your option is. Because realistically, the rest of that offense is good to go to continue to keep winning games. Defenses, need to improve a little bit, but it's not an awful unit. Probably a middle of the pack unit there. But without that quarterback, the team gets really bad.
Yeah, I guess the guy for me would be Breland. I mean, if he's their second corner, that's not good. You're gonna have Moreau, I'm sure, creeping up his neck at the cornerback spot. I got nothing else. I mean, yeah, you're right. Is Kirk Cousins really on the hot seat? No, but I guess he still has to play his ass off to get a contract. Like, what does he have to do?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. He's going to get a contract. It might not be from Washington.
Yeah, that's true. He's going to get it from somebody, whether it's from the Redskins or the Niners. The Niners are the team that a lot of people are talking about too.
Don't sleep on the Broncos, man. I've been saying this. The Broncos are one of those teams. You add a quarterback to that unit there, I don't think that their running back situation is any better or worse than Washington has. Denver has way better receivers. Defense is light years better. You put him out there, he can challenge for a Super Bowl. So there's a lot of options in the NFL that would say, yeah, come over here, Kurt. We'll make good things happen.
Who's underrated?
For me, I'm going to say Zach Brown. I really like Zach Brown a lot. He was on a 1-year deal there in Buffalo, played exceptionally well. So he's coming in. I like Zach Brown a lot. I like Will Compton as the third linebacker. Mason Foster is a very solid middle linebacker in the 3-4 system too. Are any of these guys Pro Bowlers? Probably not, especially at Zach Brown at this point in his career. But all these guys are very, very good starters.
I'll go Morgan Moses, right tackle. I'll also throw out Jamison Crowder too, because everyone wants – when people want to talk slot receivers in the NFC East, they want to talk Cole Beasley. Well, I'll throw you Jamison Crowder too, so he can ball a little bit as well. All right, who's the fantasy guy?
Fantasy guy for me is going to be Josh Doctson, and I say that because Pryor's going to get drafted really freaking high. Crowder's going to get drafted ahead of him. Jordan Reed's going to get drafted ahead of him. That's 3 options there in Washington, And you know what? The only one I'm 100% confident in is Jordan Reed. So I'm not really willing to draft highly Terrell Pryor if I'm not really confident in him. I'm not really willing to draft that high of Crowder because as productive as he's been in the slot, I don't know where Josh Doxson is. Josh Doxson's a guy who's going very late in your fantasy drafts. As far as a flyer, I'm not sure there's going to be a guy in that late part of those several rounds of your fantasy draft who has more upside than Josh Doxson. So give me Josh Doxson.
There it is. All right. That's our Redskins preview. We got the Giants up next. And tomorrow, oh, yeah, tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, yeah, we got to reveal our records, by the way. So tomorrow we got Dallas and the Eagles, obviously. You have the Redskins going 8-8. I have 6-2. You want to talk about that a little bit there? Your little chart?
Yeah, so what I want to do here, guys, I'm going to kind of slowly, after each one of these shows, because I know, obviously, hey, the NFC East, this is the big division, of course, because we're really talking with a lot of Eagles fans, and understandably and rightfully so. So what I want to do is I want to slowly show each team. So when we look here at Washington last year, they finished with 8-7-1 last year, if I remember myself correctly. So this year, I have them starting off a little hot, getting 3 wins early. Eagles, I think, is going to be a tough one. I want to have trouble with. I think they're going to beat the Raiders. I think the Raiders coming to Washington, I think that'll be a team that they'll be able to produce on. As good as the Raiders are, their defense is very, very disappointing, especially early in the year. I don't think Gary and Conley's going to figure out at corner. Give me Washington at home. But then I had the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are a tough team to play for. Andy Reid always, schemes his team, and realistically, Kansas City doesn't lose games they shouldn't. So I'll take the Chiefs at home. Then I got the Eagles beating them. The Niners is kind of a cupcake in there. Cowboys is going to be tough. I have them splitting with the Cowboys again. Going to Seattle, going to New Orleans, going to San Diego. Those are all really 3 hard away games. I think the Broncos will get them too at the end of the year. I love that defense. I think by that point, the offense will be really humming in Denver. As much as people say, oh, Denver wasn't a great offense. Yeah, you know what? They still averaged 24 points a game and were a top 5 scoring offense in the NFL. So give me the Broncos because I like the Broncos defense a lot more than what I like of the Redskins. And then the Giants, I think the Giants are going to be a much better team than they were last year. Overall, I got the Redskins finishing 8-8.
So if that scenario plays out where they lose 4 of their last 5 games, they're going to be very, very disappointed. You're looking at 7-4 there heading into the last 5 games. If they're 7-4 and they finish 8-8, oh, Gruden might get fired.
Well, you're not wrong, Adrian. I mean, obviously, when you kind of go down the stretch 7-4, then you blow the last several. You're not wrong. I mean, there certainly is an opportunity for him to get canned, but I don't think necessarily that it's time for him to go. I think if they don't re-sign Cousins, then honestly, if I'm Gruden, I'm saying, yeah, you know what? Go ahead and fire me. Because realistically, if you get rid of Cousins, Gruden's not going to be successful the year after without Cousins, and then he would get fired. So if I'm him, I'm saying, you know what? Just fire me right now. I'm going to move on.
All right. So you got Red 8-8. I got 6-10. We're doing the Giants up next.
Appreciate it, guys.